Now, I did mention in the previous tutorial that we didn't necessarily need a separate tutorial on named migrations, but there are a few things that I didn't mention which I feel might be quite important. So overall, named migrations are a valuable tool for improving the clarity, organization, and communication of your Django project's database evolution. To create a name migration, as we saw in a previous tutorial, we need to utilize the name option or name flag and then provide a name after. So that would then generate the migration. And you can see on the left-hand side here that the migration is now named first migration. So I've gone ahead and made a change to the model and then I've migrated. And we can see here on the left-hand side, we have a new migration, which I didn't name. And you can see that the naming convention is generally quite good. Django does a good job at naming the migration. So you can see here that I altered the category name or something related to the category name. So more often than not, the Django naming of migrations will be sufficient. Now, at least in my opinion, it's not recommended for you to spend time thinking about naming the migration. Now, there will be some instances where the migration name might not be suitable. We can, of course, test the migration name by using the dry run, what we learned previously, because that will tell you the name of the migration that will be created should we make the migration. So you can check the name before you actually make the migration file. And then if you're not happy with that, of course, then you can go ahead and build that customization utilizing the name option and defining your own name. Here are some key points to consider when deciding between custom name migrations and auto-generated names. So the benefits with using custom name migrations is increased clarity or the potential of increased clarity and understanding of specific changes, especially for significant modifications or complex logic. Django does do a good job at naming the migration, but if you do have significant modifications or complex logic, which you want to make sure that you detail within the naming of the file, then that might be a good time to use a custom name migration. Now, the potential drawbacks of using custom name migrations is the potential clutter in the history if overused. So the biggest issue is inconsistency. It might be okay for you to name every single migration. You may be good at doing that. But if you're working in teams, if you don't have a clear naming convention, then maintenance can start to become then a burden in large teams. Overall, Django does do a good job at auto-generating names for your migrations. So we might say that Django does have a consistent approach at naming your migrations. Ultimately, the drawback of using the auto-generated names is when you are creating significant modifications or introducing complex logic within your migrations, there is potentially going to be less clarity with the naming of the file that's generated. A good time to start thinking about using name migrations is when you're making customizations to your migration files, or of course, building empty migrations and building out the migration file. Ultimately, the message is use name migrations when you need to. Ultimately, you're going to be using custom name migrations when you need to. So the ideal approach can depend on your project's needs and complexity. Try and strive for clarity and conciseness. Prioritize meaningful context over generic names, but regardless of the naming, always try and leverage comments effectively within the migration file, regardless of the chosen naming approach.